right, we'll get started. Okay, welcome everyone to the public board debate. I always forget the title of this meeting, but thank you for joining us. And I'm the chair of the board budget committee, so I'll chair the meeting today. So as we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 7 territory in the land of the Métis Region 3 of Alberta, and want to remind us to be thoughtful about the things that we learn from Indigenous cultures on this land and across the country and across the globe about how we might best use resources, in particular in the service of children and their learning. We recognize and learn from Indigenous peoples about the human rights of children and the right that they have to education and to grow up in a community that invests in them. And I would ask us to keep that in mind as we move through the meeting today. All right, so is there any additions to the agenda? Okay, I'll just ask for a motion then. Christine? I forget what I have to call. Approve. I have a vote on the approval of the agenda. All in favor? Okay, approved. Thank you. Okay, so then I'm going to turn it over to the Director of Finance, who will provide a summary based on the feedback received from the public budget presentation that was available last week via video presentation as well as virtually for public feedback through the website.
Thank you. Kristen, are you able to pull up that the charts that I sent you? Perfect. All right, so there was a total of 134 views of the 24-25 preliminary budget video since Tuesday and 21 survey responses. 18 were parents, 2 were staff members, and 1 was a community member. For context, there were 8 responses last year for the 23-24 preliminary budget. Yeah, scroll down a little. Perfect. Of those 21 submissions, 5 ranked the preliminary budget presentation as poor, 5 said average, and 11 said excellent. Of those 21 submissions, when asked, given the provincial funding framework, how would you rate this year's overall budget? 8 said poor, 6 said average, and 6 said excellent. Lastly, of those 21 submissions, when asked how you would rate this year's budget allocation of program funding, 9 said poor, 6 said average, and 5 said excellent. Of those 21 responses, only 9 left qualitative comments. The main themes within the comments were about student supports in a variety of areas, including intervention, early learning, additional supports for EAL and Indigenous students, and support salary wages. All were valid points, and the division has tried to meet these needs within the weighted moving average funding model. I want to thank everybody who took the time to complete the survey and provide their feedback. And are there any questions? Perfect, thank you.
All right, see no questions. Thank you so much. Thank you to Avis for that, and congratulations on more than 100% increase. I guess we'll take it. Yeah, I'd encourage everyone to always check back in about opportunities to provide feedback throughout the year on the budget. So now we'll move to opening comments, where each trustee will be permitted 5 minutes to make a general comment about the budget or identify particular issues that they wish to highlight. We'll just go around, I suppose. We'll just do that. Okay, so in going around, we're just going to start over with Andrea. Sorry, I was like, whoever I pick is going to be very surprised. But we're just going to go from Andrea and then around. I'll try to keep time, and I'll just give you a little wave if you need to wrap up, okay?
Thank you for this opportunity. I very much appreciate the work Avis DeCalver, Executive Council, and the Instructional Budget Committee have done on the budget preparation, and for the way it is presented so professionally with graphics for understanding. I appreciate the feedback from our community in reference to the budget throughout the process. Starting off our budget process down approximately $3 million due to the weighted moving average and no supplement for some staff increases is problematic, and I appreciate the budgeting that has occurred around these setbacks. When we have approximately 282 students not funded for, this is an area we will need to continue to advocate for change to occur. I very much appreciate seeing additional funds of $1.9 million from the base grant added to inclusive education. And I'm thankful to see an additional 17.89 EAs for next year. If we make our enrollment numbers in the fall, I would also like to see the additional 754,000 used for classroom support as well. Early learning is a foundation upon which our students stand. The gains children make in their first 5 years cannot be replicated down the road. For this reason, I appreciate the 600,000 that was put into maintain kindergarten and EAT programs. I'm most grateful and excited for the 2 kinder care programs starting in our division to enable parents to access kindergarten for their children more easily. A 2-year commitment to this program would help us to study the sustainability of the program. In looking at student fees across our schools, I've been concerned about the increase in fees, especially for sports teams. I appreciate Avis touching base with the middle and high schools for additional information and breakdowns of how these funds are used for uniforms, equipment, and travel, etc. I appreciate the commitment to continue to work on these fees in the future so that all students can have equal access to extracurricular activities and sports. Another area of concern is that we were asked to reduce our surplus to 3.2% in August of 24, and now the rules have changed to 6% for August of 25. With our targeted reserves running low, we do want to be planning to have reserves for times when we really need them. In closing, I'd like to thank Avis and her team for the work that went into stretching the budget over all needs. I would like to thank all of our division staff for the amazing work they do in educating and supporting our students, their families, and one another. I will continue to support our board in advocating the provincial government for appropriate funding for our division, especially surrounding the weighted moving average, so that all of our students succeed to the best of their abilities.
Thank you, Andrea. All right, I'll go to Jenny.
Okay, I should have done that before. Sorry. Thank you.
Everyone turn on your mics now.
Thank you, Andrea, for those comments. A lot of the things that I had jotted down to speak to are similar in nature. I echo the challenges that were addressed by Andrea in the students that as our division continues to be a growing division, we continue to face the challenge of students who are unfunded. And when we average those 3 years, then we aren't accounting for the additional students that come each year. And it is a challenge to meet those needs without the appropriate funding for those students, and that continues to be a challenge for us. The budget is often difficult, and this year was difficult in the areas we feel we could use more funding, and challenging as well in a short amount of time to make a lot of decisions, and the work was done well, and it doesn't reflect that short amount of time. It was done very well, and I'm grateful for those who put in that extra time and that extra effort and put together a work that is very thoughtful and representative of a lot of the conversation that has happened and the values we've outlined, as well as the priorities we have outlined. I'm happy to see in our budget a focus on staffing our classrooms and adding supports in our classrooms. It's an area that I would still like to see increase, particularly for our full-time educators in our middle schools and our high schools. When we look at our numbers of our increase of enrollment at our high school and middle school levels and compare that to our increase in full-time positions, I'm concerned that when we average those out, we're still not meeting numbers. We're still looking at 36 kids to each teacher. Of those, it's more complicated than that, but it's an area I would like us to consider if we've been able to meet our goals when it comes to the staffing in our schools. The budget is reflective of the way that we value learning and the work that has gone into trying to meet the diversity of needs and abilities across our division. And I'm happy with I'm proud of the work that's being done, reflective of our early learning focus on how important it is for our kids to receive the support that they need early on, that they are set up for success as they continue through their schooling years. And for the effort that was made in this budget to provide what is needed to be able to give that to our students. An area of concern that I continue to have is spending on positions outside of our classrooms. And this is something I don't say lightly, because it's very difficult, because the work being done by various positions is extremely valuable and extremely important. And even though it doesn't directly benefit students sitting in a classroom, it does benefit our students in classrooms. And we know that. We know that a lot of these things, these positions that are filled, they do work that supports our teachers in our classrooms and supports the learning in our classrooms. And so it's an area of balance, but an area where, as I review through the budget, these are areas where there's difficult decisions to be made, and I would like to see an increase of teachers in classrooms still currently, but very, very pleased and very grateful for those who've put in the effort and have taken the time to present it in such an organized and accessible manner to our public, for all the effort that has gone into receiving public feedback and the effort that has gone for engagement with our public and with our educators and with our students. And it's something to be proud of. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Jenny. And right on time. You have 4 seconds left. Well done. Everyone knows that's 5 minutes.
There you go.
Go ahead, Allison.
Okay. Thank you. So I as well would echo the comments that have already been made, and we'll focus on some additional areas as well. Avis, thank you so much for you and your team. I think that the process that we went through this year and over the last couple of years is just getting better and better as we go. Really appreciate the opportunity to meet with administrators in January and be able to have that conversation and to carry on those conversations has been really important. I can't imagine what your job is like, to try to put everybody's ideas and thoughts together and still come out with something and then have to go, okay, we don't have the funding to do what we need to do. And it's definitely difficult when we look at the fact that we're not funded for 282 FTE equivalent for that weighted moving average. So definitely some challenges there. When I look at the funding decreases in projects and contracts, the cut to those funding by half, pretty much 435,000. When we look at other revenues are down, our other provincial revenues are down. It definitely leads me to remember the conversations that we did have at the administrator committee meeting, where the board had those opportunities to have conversations. And we heard from the staff at that time that we need to make sure that we're staying in our lane. We need to make sure that we're doing the work that we are funded to be able to do. And we have amazing staff in our division that do amazing things every single day. Sometimes those are things that are outside of the education realm. And we have a community that we live and work in that wants to support and work together with our division. And I think if we're reminded from the Education Act 33(1)(f), collaborate with municipalities, other boards, and community-based service agencies in order to effectively address the needs of all students and manage the use of public resources. resources. So I think it's really important that we're looking at a budget through that lens, that our funds are used for the education piece. When I then turn to look at the support staff and the educational assistants, of course, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's been near and dear to my heart for a long time before ever sitting on this board. I've sat in this room presenting to the board on this piece. So this is probably when we get to talk about our issues and concerns. This is my strongest area of concern. When we look at the grade 1 to 12 EAs, we do see an increase of 16.2. This brings us back up to where we were 5 years ago. We've also, from 5 years ago, increased by over 1,000 students in that time frame. And of those 16 FTE EAs, 9 of them are Jordan principals, so students, funded students. So when we look at our overall, we really have not increased that much when we look at the needs of our students. And for that, I look to the Education Act Section 33(1)(e), provide a continuum of supports and services to students that is consistent with the principles of inclusive education. When we look at inclusive education policy, to support children and students in attaining the goals as stated in the ministerial order on student learning, school authorities must ensure that all children and students, kindergarten to grade 12, regardless of race, religious belief, color, gender, gender identity, gender expression, physical disability, mental disability, family status, or sexual orientation, or any other factor, have access to meaningful and relevant learning experiences that include appropriate instructional supports. I then further look to the Jeffrey Moore case out of BC that went to the Supreme Court. Students with learning disabilities need to be accommodated so that they can benefit from educational services. The conclusions were surrounded that the service provider must provide accommodation to overcome the barriers that are presented. All school districts must now take a proactive approach to budgeting and programming to ensure that the rights of students with disabilities are accommodated are taken into account. And when I look at these numbers, I don't feel that they are, and I don't feel that we're being inclusive as well. When we dig more in, I certainly have always brought up the concern that when our classrooms are more than 50% children that are coded with supports, we're not offering inclusive opportunities. Do I still have time? Okay, the other piece is on school fees, and I'll get a chance to talk about school fees when we get there, so thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll go to Christine.
Thank you. Well, I echo everything that's been said, and I want to begin by thanking the team for putting this budget together. Thank you, Avis and Christine, for leading that charge, and thank you also to our superintendent, Mike Nightingale, for just leading the staff in the hard work it has been to get to this point, to prioritize, to cut, and to build all those things all at the same time. So thank you for your care for that. I'd also like to thank all of the stakeholders who participated in the process. It takes a community effort to support and guide and lead our students and your children. And so thank you for the support you've given through your feedback and your teamwork in the learning and education journey of our students. And I certainly appreciated hearing the priorities and concerns of parents, staff, students, and community members. When I read through the budget, I really do appreciate the way that has tried to reflect the board priorities as best as possible in early education for maintaining 10 EP programs, and as well as moving forward with our KinderCare pilot. I know our budget at this time is not necessarily the most conducive to spearheading a pilot project, but moving forward, it reflects the priority of early learning and the value of early learning, and so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for inclusive learning supports and the increase of funding going in that area. For maintaining counseling, I would like to see an increase in counseling. I think that need is there for mental health supports. supports for students, but I'm thankful that that has been maintained for technology evergreening, and as well as our digital wellness program continuing to move forward as we've continued to hear lots of feedback from all stakeholders on concerns regarding that. I think my overarching concern is really the weighted moving average. Divisions are not funded appropriately, period. Initially, the weighted moving average was championed by the Alberta government as a solution to provide predictable funding to divisions, and this has continued to not be our experience. With the extensive use of one-time grants and the lack of assurance they will be renewed, we do not have predictability. The
Well, I'm on,
WMA
but I
also
don't get any
erodes.
audio. And yet my,
Craig, can you mute yourself? Oh, he can't hear us. Okay, I'll just continue. I'll just continue to talk. The WMA also erodes sustainability. Lethbridge School Division had a robust and healthy reserve, and the government mandate to drive down reserves, we now sit as a significantly lower amount. And now that we are down, the government has now increased the amount to which we can build our reserves. And I think the volley of government directives has put divisions in precarious positions, rendering us with less flexibility to serve our staff and student community within the context of our needs. In the 24-25 budget, $1.2 million of reserves is being allocated for staffing and supplies.
again.
This is not where staffing needs to come from, and this is not sustainable. Because of the weighted moving average, 282 students are not funded next year. When students are not funded appropriately, appropriate supports can. Allison spoke to this with students not being, it's not inclusive, and it isn't. And it also hits the pockets of not only schools, but families with increased fees, core subjects, and hidden fees within those core subjects. When schools are not funded, parents are put to pay for supplies needed on top of growing fees, and this is not acceptable. Staff are the heart of our schools, and the students are the backbone of, the backbone is our staff. They are essential to the function and success of our buildings. We are not funded in such a way as to reflect this and how they are compensated. And we're having ongoing conversations as a board and as a division of our attraction and retention of staff. Feedback that I've heard that our pay does not reflect the priority of staff, and I would just like the public to know again that we have been and will continue to advocate to the government to fund divisions to allow a fair wage to pay our staff. We are not funded to pay a living wage to our support staff, and this is not acceptable. I believe students should be fully supported to experience success in their education journey. They should be inspired, curious, confident, successful, caring citizens. And regardless of the state of our budget and the deficits we have moving forward, there are lots of things to celebrate. And I know we have incredible staff that are going to inspire and support our students to the best of their abilities. Thank you.
Thank you. And apologize for the interruptions. So thanks for continuing.
It's all good.
I don't think we've got Craig's sorted out just yet. So we will go to Tyler and then to Craig.
Here we go. Only 4 trustees have spoken, and what else is there really to say? That's a lot of info that's already gone by everybody's years already. So pretty much in my mind, pretty much everything's been covered. It'll be said again. That's fine. There's lots. I would just say, given the unprecedented amount of consultation with the board this year, this budget, I think, is about as far as you can go to satisfy the board and to satisfy people with, when you have a limited amount of money and an unlimited amount of things to spend it on, it becomes difficult, and difficult choices have to be made. So I do have the utmost confidence in our finance department and the decisions they make and the way they manage the money around here. They've done a good job for a lot of years, so thank you to them, and that's all I've got. We'll give you a few more minutes to do your thing.
Not 5 minutes. Thank you. If we're able to get Craig connected, we'll let him have his 5 minutes in a bit, but I think it is not working. I don't think he can hear us. So, okay. All right, so then I'll continue. So thank you, everyone, for everything you've shared, and thank you for the time that I've been allowed to speak. So first, as the chair of the board budget committee, I also want to thank the finance team, specifically Christine and Avis, as well as Mike, the instructional budget committee, board budget committee, and community respondents to our various year-long engagement efforts. I think I share this quote every year, but I'll repeat it again this year. A budget is a moral document. A budget shows us where our priorities are and where the priorities of funders are, and how we plan to relate to one another in the coming year. Overall, this feels like a very challenging budget year, but one that has a lot of thought gone into it and has tried to fit the many priorities of a division that is expecting more than 12,000 students to walk into our doors this September. It's one that's trying to still recover from the use of huge portions of reserves since 2020, and the one that is trying to respond to the emergent, ongoing, and growing needs of complex classrooms, individual and child family needs, and the needs of our deeply appreciated staff. Some things that I want to highlight this year, again, to add on to, I'm sure, what everyone has said, but so first, because this is an area focused by one of our employee groups, the ATA, I want to share some analysis. So based on this year's coming budget, the Alberta government is investing $11,110 per student in Lethbridge School Division for 2024-2025. This is about $62 a day for specialized, differentiated education for each student who each brings different strengths and barriers, interests, and goals. Certainly, we know this is not enough. This is 20% less than the amount spent on average per student by jurisdiction across Canada in the 2020-2021 school year per Statistics Canada. Even if we zoom out a bit and look at all the money budgeted for next year, considering all of the funds, this division is investing $11,976 per student for next year. This means this division has found additional dollars for an additional $866 per student from sources other than the government of Alberta. This is about 2% more than was invested last year, but it's still 11% less than the Canadian average. We know this is dramatically under-resourcing students. We will talk about fees, and we know this is a concern for our board and across there. The reason I want to talk about it is from sort of a why does it matter to me. Because our community is fundraising, paying fees, and making donations, this is an area I'm really challenged by, and I know that we're working on in our division. 1 in 15 children in our community live in low-income families, and almost half of children who live in a lone parent family are living in poverty, according to last year's report from Shenla, a local poverty reduction group. When we have to rely on individual financial contributions to make public education work, we're setting kids and families up for failure, exclusion, and isolation. Historic inflation and over 17% increase in our local population in the last decade mean that our community is struggling to support ourselves and one another when the government budgets are diverting dollars away from kids. We need to take a look at how this shows up in our division and continue taking action to ensure governments allocate necessary dollars and fund every single student instead of the current WMA model, explained by Christine, and ensure that we're looking critically at the role of education in schools and how else we can meet the developmental needs of children, families, and students, and the community collaboratively across our city to reduce the financial burden in school. And to reserves, including in this budget, our division has invested nearly $18 million from reserves since 2017, and reserves are projected to sit at less than 1.2% for next year. Reserves can be a really hard thing to understand. Why would a school division not spend all the money we have on kids who need support today? Certainly, we never want to withhold money that is needed for children's learning, and we see when we move money from reserves into the budget, that's what we're doing. However, we also don't want to use money without intention or purpose or set future students up for assured failure. Our division strives to find the balance, putting money aside that is perhaps not used because another grant was received or the number of students needing a particular service didn't turn out to be as many as expected, or schools raise money for projects multiple years in advance and save money with that goal in mind. These funds are then used for large projects or to backstop underfunding where we can by providing more staff, learning resources, for example, purchasing supplies for the new West Side School opening in fall 2025. There are no funds in the 2024-25 budget that would add back to our reserves. And because of the change in the reserve cap, we are now behind. We're in a challenging position of having to rebuild what we may have been able to save had they not changed the cap. You can read more about this on page 23 of the executive summary. And as a final review, I find that this budget really does work creatively within our means or stretch beyond them where it comes to reserves to meet the priorities and obligations. The $1.9 million invested into inclusive learning, making sure that the administration of the division does not exceed the administrative grant received from the government, sitting at just 2.77% of the budget, making sure there are no changes in division administration staffing, maintaining and building school buildings for our growing community. For example, we are grateful for the province's selection of the new Westside School and for supporting our needs in North Lethbridge as Galbraith as well. We're maintaining a focus on wellness supports, including family school liaisons and speech language pathologists, and managing the additional 1.1 million needed for the increased transportation starting in the fall. So if this budget is a moral document, what does it tell us? It tells us that while we're underfunded, we are really striving to meet the priorities within our resources. It's not the revenue levels we want or need, and this limits the changes that we can make. But this budget is heavily invested in increasing staff hours with an increase of 36.73 full-time equivalent teachers, EAs, support staff, family school liaisons, and includes the negotiated compensation increases across employee groups. Our morals know that learning happens best when we have qualified, caring people who are supporting students, and I'm glad to see that that's where we can make that choice, that that's where our investment is going. All right, any luck with Craig? I think that we're talking to him. I don't think he can hear us, so yeah.
You can connect your computer.
Because we can hear him if he just talks into it and just. That's okay, so you hang up.
He's ignoring.
Okay.
So can you hear me? Just raise your thumbs if you can hear me. Okay. And this is my 5 minutes just to make sure. All right. As I look at the budget, I have some concerns about departments that tend to keep reserves and then later on use a deficit budget financing. But I guess first of all, although I can't hear what you're saying, I'd like to thank Mike for involving the board more in the budget conversation. And I'd like to thank Avis and Christine Lee for their work on the budget. It's not an easy thing to do to bring everybody around and get it all done in time, especially this year. But my biggest concern is that if the departments aren't spending their money, then the reserve should go into general and not expect to get something next year, because from what I can see, we're starting to do deficit financing. And I think every year it should be basically zero-based budgeting and show us what you need. And if you can't show us that you need an increase, then don't rely on reserves. Secondly, my feeling is if we have programs that have grants to them, then when the grant is finished, that's the end of the program, unless there's some statistical data that can show or support keeping it going. Some of the money that we've set aside could go to hiring EAs or another teacher. So that would be my main concerns on the budget, other than the fact that, again, it's the provincial government and their weighted moving average that causes a lot of problems. I think in the end, if there's any cuts or anything that have to be made, they shouldn't be made in the classroom. It's just, we're here to educate kids, and let's make sure that the majority of the money goes to the kids at all times. So that's basically all I have to say. I wish I could hear everybody else, but right now I've checked everything and it says it's all working. In fact, I can see you talking, but I just can't hear anything. So, but that's my feelings on the budget. Thank you.
Can whoever's typing to Craig say thank you? Go ahead, Alice.
I'm just wondering if we can take a minute, because I don't like when people haven't heard the whole discussion to be able to make an educated vote when they're voting. So I'm wondering if we can just take a few minutes to see if we can get him to be able to hear what's. He can watch the live stream, but he needs to be watching it at this time. So Craig can, oh, he can't hear me.
Okay. We can
just
take a quick recess and then just like 3 minutes and see if we can make it work. And if not, then that's how it goes. Yeah.
I think that this is a really important part of our jobs. So I think that we need to make sure that
but
heck, and if it takes a few more than 3 minutes, I think we need to make sure that we get.
I don't think it'll take much.
Perfect. Let's get her going. Thanks.
All right. 3:49, we're recess. Okay, so as we move to the next part of the agenda, we are going to go through the different revenues and allocations. For each section, I'll make the recommendation and then there can be a discussion about the recommendation. A reminder about the process, just because it is a formal process with the budget. Everyone can speak up to 2 times and I'll just make sure that we have a good balanced conversation on these different topics. All right, so for fees, 5A. Can I have a motion for 5A? Just be on the next page there, Kristen. Yeah, perfect.
I would actually like to have some discussion first because I'd like to actually make a different motion versus the one that's on here regarding school fees. So are you okay if I talk for a few minutes?
Sure.
Okay, so I know that Avis and her team has done a ton of work on school fees, and that schools have done tons of work and put things together. And I think that what you have presented to us is lots of great work has gone into it, and I appreciate that. One concern that I've brought up a few times, and we've talked about it over the years, and definitely the recognition that the concern of school fee regulation doesn't match what's in our policy, and that's a huge recognition. So before we get into the motion of the approving the school fees, I would like to make a motion to have the superintendent bring forward to the June board meeting an amended policy that complies with the school fees regulation. To have the superintendent bring forward to the June board meeting an amended policy that complies with school fees regulation. So sorry to interrupt, but I felt that it needed to be before we make a motion otherwise.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion on the floor? Okay, so I'll call for a vote on the motion. Or I guess a second. Sorry, I never do these.
Don't need a second, just say if there's no further
Okay.
discussion,
If
then
there's no further discussion,
all those in favor.
all those in favor? Okay, all in favor. Passed.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'll call for a motion for the fees for 5A. Just read it. Yeah.
I motion that the board approve the 2024-2025 school fee schedule as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Thank you. Isn't on? There it is. Thank you, Allison, for bringing forward that motion. I appreciate it. One of the items I did want to discuss was aligning our regulations with policy, and I think it's essential as we're, as a board, we approve these school-based fees, that there's transparency to the process, and then it aligns with the policies that we set forward. And so, to serve students and families well, I fully support that. I think there is, outside of that issue, I just want to express a concern about fees and the amount that we are requiring and asking parents to pay. I think a lot of this comes down to education not being funded appropriately, and really the opportunities for students to explore is becoming a privilege rather than part of a right of education. And I think with the amount that we're asking families to pay, we're slowly creating a 2-tier system of public education. I know that there are families that would like to be able to have their children participate in certain, whether it be options, extracurriculars, and they can't afford it. And I know that schools will readily say, and they do support students, and they help assist with funding for students and funding for families. But I think it's important to note that not all families approach schools for the funding. Not all families feel comfortable approaching schools for the funding, and so they just choose to do without quietly. And that is not that is not inclusive. It's not supporting students to our fullest ability. I would also like to encourage a strengthening of transparency of school budget reporting. And I'd like to have a fuller understanding of how the division is ensuring fee costs are the lowest they're able to be, and just the accountability to schools of what are you doing to provide creative solutions for those items. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny?
I share some of those similar concerns, especially around the piece of transparency and, clear communication and accountability. And I know that we have our schools working very hard to meet the needs of our students and are very devoted in that effort. And when I speak to accountability, it's not a lack of trust in that effort and that work being done. It's more of that piece of the communication and the consistency and the ability for families to plan, and where we're seeing sometimes some discrepancy across the division for our schools charging very different fees for similar classes at each of our levels. Sometimes one of our high schools is charging this fee and another one is charging another fee, and there's some of them have some large discrepancies. And some of these fees, as I review through them, I'm concerned at how high they are. I'm concerned about fees associated with classes like phys ed. I know that for many families, these are real barriers. And so not being able to take what I consider to be a mainstream class when I'm talking about phys ed or some of these other classes because of fees associated would cause me to have more questions, to say what are we paying for, and could some of these things be optional for these families so that they can still participate in the phys ed, but maybe not go on an off-site, whatever that would be, or whatever it would be. And it's not just phys ed, but a few of these, I have concern enough to hesitate before approving the fee schedule.
I do want to clarify that the fees you're seeing are related to school. These are school generated funds fees. They're extras. So a phys ed class, your basic phys ed class, there is no fee. These are for anything extra related to that particular activity. So it's not the basic that we're required in order to achieve the student outcomes per the Education Act. These are extras. And so, yes, fees are, if they're high, they're a barrier to kids participating in extras, and there's no argument there. I also want to let you know some of the reasons we see increases of the costs are outside sometimes the school's control. Inflation related to the cost of transporting kids, the gas for their vehicles that they run. We just received charter quotes for next year. One of our charters, a 73% increase in the fee. The others didn't go up quite as much, but it's just an indication of some of the cost pressures and that impacts their fees and what they can offer. So I did want to. But certainly, this is something we need to monitor and check and say, hey, is there a way to do the same thing in of course, a cheaper manner?
I really appreciate that clarification. Thank you. So with these, then these are optional things that to take the basic class, that's not a mandatory fee. What about when we're talking about foods or automotives, those ones? So to sign up for foods,
those are options.
Those are the options.
Those are fees to do above and beyond the basics. So,
but for phys ed,
a good example is, and someone explained it to me once. A good example was if the curriculum studies in wood shop was to build a let's say a birdhouse in order to achieve the outcomes required for that course. But you wanted to do the optional project, which was to build a doghouse. It has more materials and stuff, then you could pay the fee to do the doghouse. Yeah, that was the example that was given to me a number of years ago.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I then, with that further understanding, I still, when I look at these and I look at, one of our schools is charging $1,000 for basketball and the other one's charging $400. These are big discrepancies, and these are big impact on families' budgets, and I see concern in these areas.
So when I followed up with the high schools about the discrepancy between those, the major impact was travel. So the one that's charging $1,000 travels extensively to Edmonton, Red Deer, sometimes even the States for tournaments, whereas the other ones stay more local because it's different. Like there's 3A versus 4A. So that's why there's those that large of a discrepancy. Yeah, you bet.
Andrea.
Thank you for the clarification from both of you. I too echo the concerns of Christine and Jenny that there are families that would not reach out to the school to let them know that they have a need, and just really don't want to see a two-tiered system when we're missing out on some really talented athletes who might not be able to take part because of that. And so moving forward, we're going to work on the fees and making them as equitable as we can. That's the plan.
Christine and I have discussed, and as well with our school accounting coordinator, like how we can prepare documents so that it's showing exactly, okay, this is how much of that $1,000, how much is travel, how much is uniforms, how much is equipment replacement, those types of things. So having more documentation about that going forward. I know that is within at all the school levels, but it's just a matter of putting it throughout the whole system so that everybody is aware.
And just further to that, what we're thinking of with a form would allow a school to document their fees, why that fee is being charged, and again, what is the fees going to cover, and then also if it's going up or down, the reason why, and that would be a standard reporting that easily shared with their school councils and their parents and their families and stuff like that. So there's a little that we can have them be a little more transparent.
Thank you. As I said earlier, I know that there's lots of work that has gone into this. Back in 2016, I stood together with the Minister of Education when he introduced Bill 1, which was the reduction of school fees. And I understand that there's differences depending on what league that kids are in for sports. But when I look at pieces of students still getting an education, so when we look at physical education 2030, there's an increase from $100 to $175 for a high school student in our division to be able to participate in physical education. To me, when we look at this is public education, and when I'm going to stand with the Minister of Education to reduce school fees so that it's equitable for all students to have access, I don't feel that that's getting us to that place. When we have policy that states if an increase is more than 5%, we need to be having conversation about that. This is huge, right? Like this is options for students to be able to in order to graduate, you have to have options. So when we're talking about whether that's a basic education or not, in order to get a high school diploma, you have to have your option classes, and you need to have funds to be able to take those courses and do that. And we live in a community across the province. There's many cities and towns that students live under the poverty line. Like it's not okay for us to continue at the rate that we're going with the fees that we're having. It needs to be equitable access to all, affordable to all. When I look at study keys that are going out, so we're only offering study keys to students that can afford to have that enhancement, and I understand that it's an enhancement to education and that's not a basic fee. Those are pieces that concern me as a trustee, that we should be educating all students. There's a reason we don't offer private schools here. Like we don't have an arm of us that, you can buy your education. I want all students in our division to have access to the same thing, regardless where their parents work. If they might not have parents that fund them, they need to be able to have that opportunity. So I certainly struggle with a number of the fees that are in here when it comes to those things that I still consider, even though it's an option course, a basic education for our students to graduate. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. Can Greg still hear us?
His hand up.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. It's my understanding that things like skating, if we're using the arenas or the swimming pools, the city doesn't charge us?
Yes, if it's done through, if it's booked during school hours, then yes, we have through the joint use agreement, then yes, that's no cost. Swimming, sometimes there's a cost for the lifeguard. If there's more than so many kids, they have to have an additional lifeguard, but we get one free.
Okay. But I would echo the other trustees' concerns because phys ed is one of the option courses that you might need to graduate, and our prices seem to be pricing it out of kids that aren't coming from affluent homes, because 100 to go from 100, what was 120 to 175, that's quite a big increase. So I'm a little concerned about that too. It seems like we're pricing ourselves out, we're pricing our students out of being able to take some courses that they'd like to take.
Thank you, Greg. To Avis.
I just wanted to also state that those fees that are listed there are the absolute maximums that they would be, because a lot of things like Christine was talking about, like with transportation. So they plan these events and then they take the field trips or like the buses to the arena, say for the skating. That we're not sure what the cost may be now, but so that's the maximum. So could be less. So just wanted to make sure that that was out there as well.
Tyler.
Okay, I get a little bit. I agree with everything that's said. My only thing that nobody is bringing forward is where's the money going to come from? So that's all great to say that, at the comments at the start was we need more kids, or we need more teachers, more support staff in the classrooms, everything else. So which is it? Because you have to choose at some point where the money's going to come from. So either our staffing is 80% of our budget, 80% of our budget. So if you're gonna reduce the fees, that's great, and I actually am for that. I agree with everything that you're saying as far as that goes, but you can't just say the fees are too high. And to me, there should have, in all the budget discussion that's gone on this year, in the past year, the fact that it's coming up now, wow, little late, people, little late. So you need to bring forward something about where the money's coming from. So if you've got something with that you want to put into what should be a debate about whether or not we're passing the school fees as presented. I haven't heard an amendment yet. All I've heard is opinion on everything as opposed to actual concrete solutions to what we've presented. So I would love to hear that. Otherwise, I think we need to move forward.
Okay, everyone's had a chance to speak. So the motion is on the floor that the board approve the 2024-2025 school fee schedule as presented. As Tyler said, no amendments have been made. So I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor? All opposed?
Okay, then I will need an amendment to how we fix this because we can't actually go forward because it's material to our budget. So our budget can't go forward until we get a pass of the school fees. So do you want us, direct us to have the schools reduce their fees, specific certain fees, and we can go back? But until it's material to the budget. So we actually can't go forward without the school fees being passed.
So for context, for the board, we have discussed this extensively over the last number of budget conversations, including via email, as well as in person at our previous board budget committees. And so, yeah, I would echo Christine's call. If the current conversation around the efforts that are going to be put into place to respect the wishes of this board, as well as ensure that our policy meets Education Act, are clearly insufficient to pass this motion that has been on the floor, then I would be calling for another motion or amendment. Because yeah, we can't move forward without this section.
So there's currently a motion on the floor, so. Okay, right. So then I would. That the board approve a 24-25 school fee schedule that does not see greater than a 5% increase from the previous year.
In any single line or all overall?
Pardon?
I would think it'd be by single line overall. It's too hard to.
I agree. I just want to be clear. If we're going to give like completely different direction to the administration, then we need to be very specific.
I'm just coming up with a solution.
Yeah, no,
so it's
that's
like, how do we get to where we need to go? And for me, it is truly about, it's not about the sports piece. I understand that hotels costs and increase in fuel, like those pieces, but we need a solution. For me, my hugest concern is around the option courses, which I get are not basic education, but or I can change the motion that it's for any option courses that it's not greater than a 5% increase, because I think to graduate school, you cannot be having these parents registered their students knowing that it was based on last year's school fees, right? They haven't been presented with these not knowing if their kid needs physical education 2030 and they have to pay $175, it increased by $75. That's a lot. What did they do last year that's going to be different this year that can't be done within a 5% increase? So I'm fine to change my motion and have it just for the, what is it called in here? For
Single option fee?
Yep, for the option fee courses. So I will amend my friendly amendment that it's for the fees for optional courses to not increase by more than 5% from last year. That's my sticking point on this. I know others have others, but that is for me.
Okay, so I have motion, Allison Purcell, that the board approve the 2024-25 school fee schedules on the condition that not one single option course fee has an increase of more than 5%. Option, no option, none.
That's fees for optional courses.
Fees
for optional courses do not exceed 5%.
Fees for optional courses, yeah. Optional courses do not exceed 5%.
Yep. Okay. And I see this as a step in the right direction. I think that next year I don't have an issue with it going up further than 5%, but I think it is about having those conversations with school councils, with parents, whether it's the parent group. And I know I appreciate Avis reaching out to schools, and a lot of them did reach out and have conversations with parent groups that would be related to the sport. So I full on appreciate that. I think that it does need to be that this is together with our parents that are going to be paying these fees. So next year, I don't have an issue if it is higher than 5%, but those conversations need to happen together with families.
Can I just ask Kristen to read out what she has? So, because I've written so many bloody things that I may have it jumbled. So I want to make sure the person who's doing the minutes has exactly what you guys are going to vote on.
I have that the board approve a 2024-2025 school fee schedule on the condition that fees for optional courses do not exceed 5% increase.
From last year's fees.
from 2023-24 fees.
Jenny?
I think that I appreciate the solution. I appreciate that it's reflective of what is currently in policy right now, but I recognize that there's some work to do there as well. I understand why we're saying the 5%, and I appreciate why. I am a little bit concerned about how limiting it is, and that when we look through these and we look at, for example, the band option to do guitar, that went from $20 to $50. That's probably a reason for that. We're looking at 150% increase there, but probably for good reason. So if we pass this motion, is that school no longer able to offer guitar? And so thinking through the consequences of what we do in this motion, I'm concerned about how limiting that would be, that our schools then would have to potentially remove options, right? And so I'm not sure that is the best solution. I think what we are looking more for is for anything that has experienced a significant increase, that just needs to be evaluated and looked at further, right? Is really what we're trying to get at is, okay, are all of the costs associated with this increase, are they necessary, right? And in some instances, they really would be, right? There's probably very good reason that guitar specifically went up from 20 to 50, right? And so we're limited by time. We can't very well sit here and say all increases over 5% need to be individually reviewed and justified, right? But I would question the 5%. And I know why it's there. I know it matches what is currently in policy right now, but I do question how limiting it is. I'm not sure what the solution is, but I appreciate Tyler's comments. We did have this conversation at previous budget meetings. We have been having this conversation. And we are concerned. And we're concerned because we're hearing from parents who are concerned, right? And students who are concerned. And there are some students who policy at home is they want to do something, they raise the funds themselves. And so there is reason to be concerned here. The 5%, I'm not sure what a better way to word that would be, but perhaps a motion where fees that have increased more than 5% need to go through an evaluation process. And I'm not sure how we could put that into motion, but perhaps we could say any fee that has increased over 5% contingent on them, agreeing to go through a review process, whatever that review process would be, whether that's with their administrator, however that looks like. But I think that we need to give room for our schools to be able to make their case for what they need to do. And we need to make a motion that gives them that ability still to come and justify their fee. And I think that it will accomplish what we're trying to do because it will encourage our, increased fees to look at what they're doing and where can they, is there areas they can reduce cost? And our schools to do the same. Is there areas that we can meet the needs of students with less increased cost? But I'm hesitant to make it so strict that we remove programming.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor, friendly amended by herself. I'd just like to call a question, I think, because I feel like we're at a bit of an impasse. So
can you just hang on 2 seconds? Do you have a suggestion for an addition to it, a friendly addition? Because I'm open to other things. Yeah.
Jenny, respectfully, I think that's what has already been directed to the administration is to review those. And I think personally that the ship is too big to move like before, like you said, these fees haven't been presented to families. They need to be those types of things. And we've asked administration to go back, and that's the confirmation we've received. So that's why personally, like, I don't want to change the motion. And then, while I continue to agree, that's what I think is already in motion. So.
You want us to do a review of the fees. So the administration of the school sets the fees with their staff and the people who organize the various activities. So for us to investigate, we would have to sit down with each one of them and say, open your books for every fee. Kind of, we did a deep dive. That's what we did on those other ones. It's a lot of work, and we don't really have the manpower to do that in a timely fashion.
So just for clarification, as the motion sits, its fees will not increase more than 5% for option courses. Okay. So then budget-wise, basically what that does is any fee, if let's say guitar, since we use guitar as an option, let's say that fee goes from 20 to 50, they won't charge more than $21 now for that course. So if the school wants to offer it, the school's budget, then that particular school that's offering the particular course will eat that in their budget, correct?
They'll have to find a way to offer it.
Yeah.
Or the $21.
It'll come out of each school's budget depending on what their offerings are.
Yeah, it could be their budget or they fundraise. So sometimes a fee doesn't always cover all the activities. Sometimes school council chips in, sometimes there's fundraising.
But I just mean the school needs to find a way, or each individual school
would find a way in order to offer it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Craig and then we'll call.
Were you looking for an amendment, or is Jenny going to bring an amendment?
Sorry, I keep forgetting. I'm not going to do an amendment based on the further conversation of really what I was throwing out there as an idea for an amendment isn't very feasible. But what I was going to suggest is my other concern is some of these fees, when we say 5%, if you're looking at a fee, like Tyler said, $20, well, a 5%, they can only, if they're looking at going from $20 to $25, or they can only increase that now $1. Some of these are should it be any fee over $30 or something? Like should we say any fee? Do you know what I mean? Because the 5%, when you're talking about something less than $30 or $40, 5% is maybe not reasonable. Any fee over $50, or it would be maybe my suggestion. I don't know what the dollar amount everybody would agree on, but my idea to throw out there is, should we put a minimum on that of any fee over $40, $50, whatever it is, because there's got to be some reasonability to it.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, I'm going to go to Christine, and then I am going to call the question because we have many other categories that we still need to discuss as well.
I'd like to make an amendment to the motion.
Craig, I'm just going to talk.
Sorry, I recognize Christine, and then I'll go to you.
I think this conversation illuminates the need to ensure that our regulations are aligned with our processes, right? Like I think if they are aligned, we would not be having this conversation. We would know the whys. We would know the essential pieces of why fees are increasing. And I think for myself, I know the cautions that I have with some of the fees, aside from the equitable piece, is I don't have a clear picture as to why. Right. And so when we were given our list of explanation, it was consumables have increased. I don't know what that means. I don't know what a consumable is. And so when I look at for example, we were given high school fee schedules and for athletics. And so when I look at the miscellaneous columns, one high school miscellaneous was around 2,000, one high school miscellaneous was around 3,000, and another high school miscellaneous was over 13,000. So that's a huge differential. So I want to understand why, and I know that that's going to happen when our regulations align with the policy. I would be knowing that this work is going to happen, knowing that we're on an intentional course as a board. I do not want to inhibit learning opportunities from students as much as I don't want to support high cost. But Jenny is right in that we don't know the whys. And so I also don't want to inhibit students from being able to experience options that would help them discover themselves, be inspired to learn, etc. And so knowing that this work is on course, knowing that this board is intentionally on board to tackle this, I would be willing to go back to the original motion, knowing that this work is happening.
Okay, final comment to Craig.
Yeah. Well, I would move an amendment to the motion that any option course that presents a budget greater than 5% increase must be evaluated and approved by the superintendent of schools. And I think, because of that, it allows for input from a school, because they've already sort of said what they want, but it allows for some input from the school to say, here's why we want more money for this particular thing. Because at 5% at $100, that's only $5. At 120, it's $6. So, I mean, I think my motion would be able to satisfy some of the concerns, plus it would also put some emphasis on accountability from the schools and on our school district.
So was that an amendment
As I
to
say-
to Allison's, or was that a full brand new motion? Because we have to deal with one first and then the other, if that's the case.
It's an amendment to Allison's motion, because she made a motion to keep it at 5%. And I would just say that anything over 5% has to be approved and evaluated. And so it keeps it at 5%. But if a school, through their process with the superintendent and the parents can prove that, can show that they needed a little more increase than 5%, then it works both ways.
Okay, I'll let Mike respond, given that it would assign a great deal of work to the office of the superintendent. And then,
Yeah, it would. Yes, it would be a task that would likely be delegated. Certainly, I would have my finger in it, though. I recognize and appreciate the concerns of the board. I think they're.
I
think
would
they're
say
valid.
superintendent or
Craig?
delegate, yes, I
Craig?
would add that.
can I just
Yeah.
let Mike respond, please?
Yeah. So I would agree with the concerns. We need to get a better process that obviously needs to be earlier and needs to be informing people. There's no question about that. Unfortunately, we're sitting here with not all the information and an inability to get the information with some pretty tight deadlines, and that's not where we should be. And so that's something that we just got to rectify moving forward. I certainly agreed with, I understand what Jenny was getting at. It makes a lot of sense. It's just one of the things I went over and asked Christine, is it possible from an operational perspective? That was my biggest concern. The concept makes lots of sense. The concern is we don't have the information about the fees. Let's get the information. That's a pretty logical recommendation from the board. It's just, can we do it in a timely fashion in a way that makes sense? And so that would be my biggest question or concern, Craig, just like was raised around the table, is can we get it done for you in a way that's appropriate and makes sense and honors our, and really that just depends on the timeline too.
Like, I really think moving forward, what we've been kicking around in finance related to basically the fee spreadsheet that we're going to have everybody complete, it outlines this fee specifically going to be used in these categories. And so that people can see, really how much of that fee is going to pay to transportation for consumables, which is usually paper, glue and whatever it is that they use and to do glitter, depending on the project, and that sort of thing. And so I think it provides it'll provide more transparency, and then it'll be, okay, if your fee's going up from $20 to 50, why is that? Well, because we have the rentals for the guitars are now X number of dollars, or we need to replace the guitars because, and we, maybe in order to do it, who knows, right? There, some football fees, for instance, they save some of that fee goes to replacement of the safety equipment, that sort of thing. So I think going forward, we can certainly give you greater comfort around that. Yeah, it's just a little hard at the moment.
Within this year, yeah. Okay, so we have an amendment. Do you consider it friendly?
Did somebody write down exactly?
Craig had any moves, any fee greater than 5% must be reviewed and approved by the superintendent of schools or delegate.
So if it was an amendment, like friendly to me would be if it was an exceptional piece versus basically that's pretty much the whole thing, that everybody has something over 5%. So they come forward and say, hey, I think that if there's an extenuating circumstance, like when Jenny talked about the guitar class can't carry on, but just in looking at the piece that they offered the course last year, so there can't be that big of a huge thing that's going to be greater than 5%. Some of it's the phys ed trip, they're doing something different. They're going rock climbing instead or canoeing. Like, I think it's something additional that they could go back to what they were doing last year and still offer it. So to me, it would be only friendly if it was like an exceptional piece to bring forward to Mike. So.
Okay, so then we'll treat it as a separate motion. And if I remember my rules correctly, we vote on that one first?
Yes.
Great, good for me remembering the pyramid. Okay. So we're going to vote on Craig's motion to have the superintendent review. Please see everything over 5%. All in favor? All opposed? What's the opposite of declined? Moving on. Defeated. Thank you. I was like, there's a word. Sorry. Thank you. So then now we're back to Allison's motion that optional courses increased by no more than 5% on any single fee. All in favor? All opposed? Defeated. Andrea?
That the board approved the 2024-25 school fee schedule as presented, and that moving forward, conversations start earlier in the year for transparency around the fees.
So the same motion plus that the conversation be engaged with the board earlier
Yes.
for the 25-26 school fee budget.
Yes. That conversations start earlier for the 25-26 fee schedule, and that there be more transparency around the use of the fees.
Okay. All right. The motion's on the floor. Any salient discussion that would lead to an amendment?
Engage earlier is fairly vague. Are we comfortable with that wording?
I thought we said January in one of the.
Christine Light, then Christine Lee.
Would the engagement piece not be within policy and regulation? And if it is within policy and regulation, do we need it in this motion?
Christine Lee.
Yeah, so right now, the policy doesn't say when they just have to come and that sort of thing. The procedure says should come to the board by March 31st. So if we make sure they're coming to you by March 31st. That gives us plenty of time to have the conversation. If we beef up our procedure, like we're talking about changing, that's the procedure piece, not the policy. The policy itself only needs a small tweak actually to be in compliance. So our procedure, we're gonna beef it up a little bit, I think, so there's more direction on what we're going to expect for that information that we're gonna gather, and so that it's available to the board by March 31st. Yeah, but the policy's not very specific on the engagement with school councils and when, and so we're going to beef that up a little bit as well.
So Denny, did you want to make a friendly amendment?
Let's use the March 31st, you said? Is it March 31st? Let's just use the date in the motion.
Do you want to say per policy? Or
as according to policy? And procedure, as according to. That's implicated already, right? But I mean, if we were following that, I mean, it's one thing to sit here and say, well, it's already in policy, but we wouldn't be here if there's obviously a concern here. So something needs to be said because our processes aren't matching our policy and procedure, right? Is really why we're having this conversation right now.
Which we've also seen a motion that we've approved right before this, right? So, yeah.
So the motion before was just that the policy is changed. So I think what Andrea is trying to say in this is that basically that we need to ensure that we follow policy. So I think if could be a friendly amendment instead. So after the word presented, that next year's school fee schedule follow the school counts or school fee regulation and board policy and procedures. And it just ensures it's going to happen. So is that a friendly enough amendment?
Yes, I accept that.
Amendment accepted. All right. So then the motion is this motion plus that it would follow policy regulation. Thank you.
Okay, I'll read it. Motion by Andrea that the board approve the 2024-2025 school fee schedule as presented, and that the 2025-26 school fees schedule follow the school fee regulations and board policy and procedures.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Carried. All right, 5B. Revenues and allocations on page 27 of the executive summary. Can I have someone call a motion?
Have you read the motion? Okay. I move that the board approve the revenues and use of one-time reserves for the 2024-2025 budget as per page 27 as presented.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried. 6A. Can I have a motion? Expenditures instruction. Christine?
I move that the board approve the instruction expenditures and transfers as per pages 33 to 35 of the 2024-2025 budget as presented.
Discussion. All in favor? Yes, not, yeah. Oh. Sorry, I counted in my head. I went too fast. Allison.
So with the instruction budget, I talked in my opening comments of some concerns in this area, and those concerns definitely continue. I think when we see the reduction, the cut in 50% of our projects and contracts with not having the boost, the learning disruption grant, the wellness, digital wellness grant ending, and us looking for funds to put back in to be able to carry those pieces forward. When we look at our EA funding and the increase is not being there for what we need. High school increases by 211 students, and we're only adding 6 FTEs for that. That just right off the bat, I know that that's not just there's 6 additional teachers in one school and 211 students, but just based on those numbers alone, that leaves our numbers for those high school classes at 35 students a class, which is extremely concerning to me when we look at the complexity of our classrooms and not having the support systems in place. I think that we, when I look at the instructional budget, we're not cutting in areas that we should be to move over to the areas that we have an obligation to provide support for our students. And some of these pieces are nice haves when we might have funds. And I don't feel that we have funds to be supporting the things that we have been previously. And I feel that we need to be cutting more where the government provided cuts to us and providing more funding for the areas that I feel we have an obligation to be able to provide for education with supports for our students. We need to be able to provide the accommodations that are necessary for them to be able to be provided with an education. And I don't feel that we are doing that with the instruction budget the way it's laid out. So I will be voting against this.
Jenny?
I will be voting against it as well for reasons you just outlined very well. So in the interest of time, I won't repeat them with my brand attached to it. So thank you, Allison, for articulating that very clearly. Again, really, it's hard to make cuts where we have to, but at the end of the day, when we're seeing increase in enrollment that we're seeing, I would be more comfortable seeing increase in staffing to reflect it.
Thank you, Jenny.
I'm in agreement with their points. I too would like to see more funds going towards staffing.
I would just like to make a point that if you all would like to vote against this, that you have another solution coming forward to it, and or make an amendment now. Just because we will be in the same situation we were for the last hour, also that we could just review fees, which we could do anyway.
So I'd be seeking an amendment given don't see Craig, but. Okay. Seeing no other feedback. We'll go to the motion though. So the motion on the floor is that the board approve the instruction expenditures and transfers as per page 33 to 35 as the 24-25 budget as presented. All in favor? All opposed? Defeated.
So what we'd like to change in order to pass this budget, you are legally obligated to pass a budget by May 31st, just a reminder. So what is it you need to make an amendment to this budget that's going to get it passed?
Sorry, who was first? Andrew? Sorry, I was just trying to read the rules about the motions. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Jenny. You look ready.
I was just going to suggest a motion that the board meet prior to all who need to be in present prior to 31st, you said it's due, right? To develop a plan that will meet a board approval, because I'm not sure that this meeting right now is the time for that debate, would be my suggestion for a motion.
So very respectfully, as the chair of the board budget committee, the fact that the board has been involved in all of the board budget committee meetings, and was specifically asked at the last committee meeting, is there anything that would make you like turn down this budget? Is challenging because this is that meeting, right? And the meetings that we've had before are those meetings, because there's not necessarily, I would say, time is my guess to substantially change the budget if you don't have an emotion at this time. Yeah.
So I think that there is time. We have till the 31st. And I think that we did speak and we have spoken. And I think that this is called democracy. And this is us using the vote that we do have to say that this budget wasn't what we had requested or that we stated that we needed to see changes of. I spoke in my words in regards to the places that we saw cuts, and we saw the cuts from the government and we don't see the cuts in the budget. And I know the parts that we need to see increases in to be able to provide for these students. So it's not that it's new words, it's that I have the right with my vote to be able to vote for what I stand for, what I've continued to speak of. And it's not anything new. It's that what's presented isn't what I've stated that I am in desiring from what I've heard from people in our schools, from our parents, from our staff of what's needed. And I don't think that it's that I haven't spoke up or I haven't said anything. It's a reflection that the budget that's presented isn't what doesn't hear what I had spoken all along. So I think to say that we've had plenty of opportunity, you're right, we have. It hasn't been heard. So, and there's 4 of us in the room that use the power within our vote to be able to do that. And now we do need to go back and figure out something different that will get us to a point of covering the complexities that our teachers are seeing every day, our support staff that don't feel supported, our students and our parents that are coming forward saying, my kid needs supports to get the education that they need. Us just pushing through a budget because this is what's in front of us isn't going to get us to what we're hearing from people of what they need so that students get the education that they need. Government said these are your cuts. We need to see those same cuts in our budget, and I'm not seeing it.
So the amendment from Jenny was to work on, or I guess the motion, because we don't have a motion to amend. So the motion is to meet this board and the executive to rewrite the budget before the 31st.
Produce a budget
Yeah.
that will meet board satisfaction before the 31st.
So presumably, though, it would need to be approved in public. Sorry, I'm just trying to think about timelines to try to meet that.
May I ask what will need to be changed? That's what I need to know, because if we just have a guideline saying it needs to be changed, I need specifics, please.
I'm going to make a comment. I appreciate where you're coming from, Allison. But when you talk about where the government cut, when we look at where we lost funding in early learning. And we're putting money in to support early learning. We also are not funded by the government for early learning. Do you want us to cut early learning to support the other areas? This board also put in a pilot project for KinderCare, which is a fabulous project. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important to invest in early learning. So that is one of your priorities. But it's also something that we're not funded. So when you're equating to what the government did to us, we're doing it also to ourselves by putting money elsewhere other than where the government has given us money. So that's where we've removed money to support those things versus other. And so that's where we make the choices. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I think they're very valid choices. But also I guess that's the question. Should we have not done that and put the money into EAs and classrooms specifically? I don't know. But I'm just telling you, there's choices that we've made and choices have impacts.
Going back to last year, in my memory, I thought that there were parts of a budget that you could say you were in disagreement with, but then that the budget as a whole could go forward. Is that not true?
If you fail the most significant part of your budget, I mean, I can ask the people who voted against instruction, would you vote for the budget as a whole? Because technically, if you voted down the most significant part of your budget.
Yeah. Okay. Can we call the question again? Is that allowed? Because I just really want to, the early learning piece is really important to me. The kinder care portion is really important to me. I apologize because I thought you could like morally say, I would rather have seen more EAs and more teachers, but overall support the budget.
Okay, I'll go to Jenny and then Christine.
Excuse me, Christine isn't wrong in what she's saying. We made choices. And the early learning and the kinder care program, that's definitely an area we have chosen to take money and spend it, that the government isn't giving us specifically for that. But it's not a matter necessarily of either early learning or the budget or teachers in classrooms. There's other areas you can look at. If you have other areas identified that you would like to see or further discuss possible adjustments, that's not the only area here to discuss. And so it's not one or the other. And so if there's things that you have recognized in the budget that you would like to see changed or an adjustment. So for example, for myself, it's been touched on a few times, there was grant money, right, for a digital wellness team. That grant money ends, but we have budgeted to continue the work, and it's very incredibly valuable work. There's a good argument for doing that. My own position on it is looking at the budget, looking at our teachers in classroom increases, and looking at the cost to continue that. For myself, I would say that would be one thing I would recommend. I would prefer to see an additional full-time teacher in a classroom. Things like that. If there's things that you know you would like to see changed, then that's what we're talking about.
Christine?
I just want to recognize the incredible work our division staff have put into ensuring that we have this budget, that we have had FTE teacher and EA increases. $1.9 million has gone into inclusive learning supports. And I think no one is denying the fact that we do not have enough EAs. No one is denying the fact that we could use more teachers. We have been advocating as a board for 3 years for appropriate funding. And we've been telling people we do not have the funding to provide the supports that students need. This has been our flag for 3 years. So then all of a sudden, around this table, after half a year of having budget debate, community engagement, staff engagement, student engagement, we're saying, well, it can just be easily moved. I don't know. I don't know from where. And I think our staff have bent over backwards to try and find creative solutions. I think as a board, we are putting money into, we prioritize early learning, and we are choosing to put money into 10 early learning classes and kinder care, which we are not obligated to do. That is optional money that we are putting to a board priority. And I support that board priority. I believe in early education. I believe in early interventions for supports, and that it sets students up for success. But I think if we are looking at I don't know where the solutions are going to come from, or if there's going to be magical money coming. As a board, we had a divided vote to join PSBA, and that's an additional $40,000+ a year. Like there's spending that we have been doing that isn't necessarily essential. And I'm not saying I'm disavowing the benefit of PSBA. That's not what I'm saying. But we make these financial choices. And so I don't know how we can say we're going to choose to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into early learning that we're not legislated to do, but we're going to have to cut things we are legislated to do. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and ultimately what I'm missing is, and I, certainly have tried to listen and certainly have tried to get the priorities and have lots of conversation is, are there specific things, Jenny, you mentioned one about the digital wellness. I appreciate you sharing that that specific concern. Are there other concerns that we can discuss and have conversation about now is my question.
Because this involves staffing and employment and humans, I would really like for this to be perhaps out of camera rather than discussing people's positions in public.
If I could talk about that.
Sure. Sorry, Craig. I just want to recognize Morig's request. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Yeah.
If you want to have a really deep conversation, we need to move in camera.
Okay, so we'll I think I need a motion to go on camera. Andrea?
I just need an answer as to.
Sorry, I'm just gonna deal with the
sorry.
in-camera piece first, please.
Sorry.
Can I get a motion to move in camera? I don't know how this part works. Do I need? Yeah, that's enough. It's one. Okay. So we'll be in camera. Can we get pause, please?
I think that there's a question before we go into camera. Is that right, Andrea? Yeah, there was a question on the floor before we go into in camera.
I was trying to deal with it in order. Sorry. In camera? Oh, we have to vote.
We haven't voted it
sorry.
before a vote. We need to have a discussion.
Sorry.
So.
Okay. Discussion on in camera. Did you have a question about the process? And then I'll come to Craig.
Before moving in camera, I wondered if I could have an answer about the question being called again, the motion being called again.
Okay, to call the previous question. Yeah, we can't call it because it wasn't on the floor. You'd have to make that as a separate motion. And I think we weren't sure if you can even make the same motion again. Okay. Okay. Now I'm confused about the process. Okay. So that's the answer to the question is we can call it if it has changed substantially from the original motion. So we're in discussion about moving in camera.
Sorry, but I just had a question because I believe there was a motion on the floor. Can we move in camera if there's a motion, an active motion on the floor? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. Can we go in camera? Okay, perfect. When we come out of camera. Okay, good.
Any more discussion on going in camera? All in favor? All opposed? Welcome back. We have a motion on the floor. Jenny, did you want to restate it? Do you remember it? To meet, to have the board and the executive meet before March or May 31st in order to revise the instructional budget. Or something therein.
Kristen?
All right. All in favor? Opposed? Correct. So that motion is defeated. Andrea?
I'd like to make a motion subject to the enrollment contingency of 754,000 being allocated to classroom teachers and educational assistants if enrollment projections are met by September 30th, that the instructional expenditures and transfers, I'm sorry, be approved as presented.
Any new discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
Yeah, I voted in favor.
Thank you. All right, moving to 6B, administration. Can I see a motion? Christine?
I move that the board approve the administration expenditures and transfers as per pages 36 to 38 of the 2024-2025 budget as presented.
Discussion.
Just so you know, in the budget, we did, for administration and in particularly the board governance area, I did put a provision for any potential increases in fees for ASBA and PSBA, probably more than they'll be required, but it was just a guesstimate, and then we can, in September, we can just reallocate to where, if there's something else that's needed, just so you know.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. You got those, Christine? Six C, plant operations and maintenance. Can I see a motion, Christine?
Plant operations and maintenance. I move that the board approve the plant operations and maintenance expenditures and transfers as per pages 39 to 40 of the 2024-2025 budget as presented.
Discussion. I can't see Craig. Sorry. I know it's hard. We've got both things going on at the same time. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate it. Okay. All in favor? All opposed? Carried. Oh yeah, sorry, it was everybody. 6D, transportation. Can I see a motion?
I move that the board approve the transportation expenditures and transfers as per pages 41 to 42 of the 2024-2025 budget as presented.
Discussion?
Can you just let us know a bit more about transportation, knowing that it's K to 6 is the 1 kilometer piece? So can you just tell us how our division is going to be separating that with the grade 6 students that will be at the middle schools?
We will have to see how the bus loads are. And usually then what we do is for the grade 6s, if there's a room on a bus, then they'd be able to hop on that bus. Otherwise, we'll have to figure it out. But yeah, we're only funded for, unfortunately, it was the crazy split. So yeah. Don't get me started on the whole thing.
We have feelings about transportation.
Just making sure, and there would be no fees for the additional students that might be from the middle school.
Yeah, no, yes, there was no fees in the fee schedule. We probably have to seriously look at fees for next budget, though. Just giving you that warning coming down the pike.
Further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Unanimous. Carried. 6E, capital and debt services.
I move that the board approve the capital and debt services expenditures and transfers as per pages 43 to 44 of the 2024-2025 budget as presented.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried. So we're moving now to 7, budget approval. So this is for the full budget. Can I see a motion? Okay.
Sorry. I move that the board approve the 2024-2025 preliminary budget for Lethbridge School Division as detailed in the previous motions and authorize administration to allocate and expend funds in accordance with the budget.
Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, seeing no other items added to the agenda, can I get, what do I do? Call for adjournment? Sorry.
As the chair, you can
I should have
adjourn.
written.
You can adjourn as
I'm
the chair.
adjourning at 5:36.